All right, so with the recent passage of the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, Joe Biden and Democrats are looking on the horizon. What is going to be their next big package? What is going to be the priority for them? And it seems like, at least with right now, that they're going to be prioritizing infrastructure, jobs, and climate. These are pretty good priorities. Obviously, that depends. There's nuance to be had and how big are they going to go with a bill like this. But overall, good priorities given the circumstances. Obviously, with our infrastructure here in the United States, even though we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world, our infrastructure is crumbling. Frequently gets a grade of a D plus to a C minus. Absolutely pathetic. We've obviously had, in addition to that, job losses throughout COVID, and creating sustainable jobs for the future in green renewable energy would be a good thing. And that obviously ties into climate change, which is this gigantic looming threat that is constantly over our shoulders, but at the same time that we somehow don't ever talk about nearly enough. And so I have a good piece here that is basically breaking down what some people who are on the left side of this political spectrum that are going to be involved in this conversation are trying to be proposing. And so here's the story. Democrats unveil Build Green Infrastructure and Jobs Act. Senator Ed Markey called the bill, quote, "our opportunity to invest in a clean energy revolution across the country, transform our transportation sector to be climate smart, and create millions of good-paying union jobs at the same time." So I don't really know how big that they're going to be wanting to go with this package. I've heard some numbers float around like $4 trillion that they're willing to go with this. So it could be a very sizable package. And so it is feasible that something like this could be included in a package like this. But here's just a little bit of the details. Going to give you a quick rundown here, and then we're going to look more into what's in it. But 4 congressional Democrats on Friday unveiled the Build Green Infrastructure and Jobs Act, a bill that would invest $500 billion over 10 years in state, local, and tribal projects to galvanize the transition to all-electric public transportation, reducing climate-damaging greenhouse gas emissions and health-threatening air pollution, while expanding clean mass transit and creating up to 1 million new jobs. So all of that obviously is good. All of that sounds fantastic. My initial reaction, honestly, when I saw this was, $500 billion over 10 years? Is that really the farthest that we're trying to go with a bill like this? Obviously, it's not meant to be as big and bold as the Green New Deal. This is a smaller, independent package that is being put forward. But $500 billion over 10 years, that's $50 billion a year. Okay, we spend $740 billion a year on our bloated military. And our military is actually one of the biggest polluters in the world, pollutes more than entire countries like Portugal and Denmark. So, if we can spend $740 billion a year on a bloated military budget that's polluting a bunch, we could probably spend a little bit more than $50 billion a year on saving the planet and preventing, hundreds of millions of people from being displaced and at threat of, the consequences that will come of climate change. Yeah, I think we could probably do a little bit more than that. But, still good stuff in here. And here's a little bit more of the details as to what's in it. So the full name of the bill, gigantic, ridiculous name here. The Better Utilizing Investments to Leverage Development and Generating Renewable Energy to Electrify the Nation's Infrastructure and Jobs Act, otherwise known as the Build Green Act, would jumpstart the transition to all-electric public transportation, expand clean mass transit to underserved communities, and help modernize our crumbling infrastructure by covering up to 85% of costs for eligible state, local, and tribal projects, with an option for Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg to cover 100% of the costs. In addition, it would reduce carbon emissions by an estimated 21.5 million metric tons of CO2 annually, or the equivalent of taking 4.5 million combustion engine cars off the road. That's pretty huge. Prevent an estimated 4,200 deaths annually by reducing significant sources of local air pollution that cause adverse health effects like asthma, and avert up to $100 billion annually in healthcare costs. It would start to correct decades of health disparities and environmental injustice by dedicating at least 40% of all funding to projects in frontline, vulnerable, and disadvantaged communities, and create up to 1 million new jobs with strong labor protections. So listen, all of that sounds fantastic. All of that sounds fantastic. I 100% wholeheartedly support this bill, whether it's included in the next infrastructure package that Joe Biden is going to be wanting to focus on, or whether it's just passed as a standalone bill, which I think would be very, very, very difficult to do given the makeup of the Senate right now. But yeah, I mean, listen, is this going far enough? No, I mean, this isn't the whole picture. This is just one small picture of tackling infrastructure, tackling jobs, and tackling climate change in this country. Obviously, this is not going to be the full extent of what we need to do, and really shouldn't even be the full extent of what would be included in the next infrastructure package. Again, my position on this is, it is literally by definition impossible to go too big on an issue like this. Okay, what is the worst case scenario? Try to imagine in your head, what is the worst case scenario for overspending on this. What are we going to do? We're going to invest too much in sustainable infrastructure for the future. We're going to create too many good paying union jobs. Are you really worried about that? Are we going to spend too much on tackling the problem of climate change and, saving the planet, preventing the planet from collapsing, preventing our food supply lines from collapsing, and actually leading the world in the future of clean and renewable energy, leading the world into this? I mean, from every single angle you look at this, there's no way that we can overspend on this. When you look at what other countries are doing, even if you wanted to take like a typical war hawk view of this and look at it as if like, oh, well, who's our next biggest opponent on the global stage in China? Well, look at what China is doing. China invests a shit ton of money in high-speed rail, in renewable energy right now. We should be leading the future. If you want America to lead the future, then one of the biggest areas you're going to have to be doing that is going to be energy production. And the best way that you can lead the future in energy production would be by investing heavily in renewable energy production, because whether you like it or not, whether you're obsessed with oil or you're obsessed with fossil fuels, I know that's some people in our country, you should want this for the future. If you want to lead the future in energy production, you should want to invest heavily in these things. So again, I don't think that it's possible to overspend on issues like this. I think you need to go as big and as bold as possible. And so leftists in Congress, whether it's, the squad in the House or whether it's Bernie Sanders in the Senate, as well as like Ed Markey and other progressives in the Senate, you need to go big. You need to demand big. Okay, there's no reason to settle on a package like this. This needs to be gigantic. It needs to be bold. And it needs to be, something that we can actually look forward to and gives us a little bit of hope that we're going to seriously address some of these looming crises, especially like climate change that hang over our shoulders all the time. So, go big, go bold, and don't back down on issues like this.